Welcome, 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 everyone, to another adventure into reality, multi-dimensional weather edition, the Age of Resolution. Today, I'm joined by Andre Hodge once again. We're going to be talking about multi-dimensional weather and the history behind it. Andre, welcome back to the series.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. It's good to be here with you and talk about something like this that has enormous potential for us, and you as a teacher to give us clarity on that when there's a lot of uncertainty around. So I'm glad to be here with you, mate.
We are going to have an adventure today. We're going to be talking about some of the early histories of hurricanes and how it's affected different things. One of the first things I want to talk about is typhoons in the Pacific and hurricanes in the east. The difference is the Coriolis effect. In ancient Japan, in 1274, the Kublai Khan tried two separate invasions in 1274, where the ships were just about to land, and a typhoon came by and destroyed thousands and thousands of ships, twice in a row. This has happened throughout history over and over again. This is known as the clearing wind or the kamikaze. We have heard this through history over and over again. The Great Hurricane of 1780 of the French New Orleans in the Caribbean, another example. The Washington, D.C. hurricane in 1814 during the British War. This is literally the British troops had just captured Washington, D.C. and were beginning to burn down the government buildings, burn down the White House, when a tornado from a hurricane spawned out of nowhere, hit the center of the British lines, threw cannons through the air, killing people left and right. By the end of the storm the next morning, the British Army was in tatters. Most of its ships in the harbor were damaged, and the whole capture of Washington, D.C., the occupation only lasted 26 hours. That is the esoteric defense process also going on. In Hong Kong in 1874, we also had another one. Now we're going to explore each of these a little bit more. Andre, history is full of these special ones. What part do you want to explore?
Yeah, the luxury I have with Andrew is all I need to. I'm sort of this spotter of targets, and I found these commonalities very interesting because you've done shows with Douglas Dietrich, and he's an interesting character in himself, and he talks a lot from the with a lot of passion about the history of the Japanese and what's gone on, um, which doesn't go along with the mainstream sort of narrative of history. And one of the things that he was very passionate about is this incident in ancient Japan where the kamikaze, um, he called it a goddess, and the what the word kamikaze means, I believe, in the Japanese terms, is the divine wind, and
Yep.
obviously, um, the Khan is enormous, era of significance relative to war and dragons. If people are interested in that, I'll drop that hint, and reality busting and connecting Europe and the Silk Road and stuff like that. So there was enormous. Um, I can feel the scale of the ominousness of the Mongols wanting to invade Japan, and and the Japanese at this time were quite feudal, and they had samurai warriors and stuff like that. But the numbers must have been staggering and enormous and overwhelming, and the weather saved them. So, do you have anything you want to add? You gave a good summary, but to me it was fascinating that context of what went on. Because,
So that was the Great Kublai Khan era.
mm,
And to have two successful invasions, successor invasions to be absolutely destroyed by the wind, um, it isn't coincidence or chance. They were they were specialists of the ocean. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were traveling at the best time of the year when the storms didn't go. It wasn't a rare storm that came out of nowhere, because most of these storms, again, form at the equator. They don't go from north to south.
mm, mm.
That is the irony of the divine wind. It came out of a direction totally unforeseen. Here is where weather control, whether it's esoteric or technological, surface or subsurface or astral, it's still a form of manifestation of programmable water.
Mm.
So the divine wind, the kamikaze, all of that is saying weather control and weather warfare was a long since been in process.
Mm.
Now the other one is the Great Hurricane of 1780 that struck the Lesser Antilles, where 22,000 people died. It struck Barbados with 200-mile-an-hour winds. Martinique, St. Lucia, St. Estevarice, all the different places, then to Puerto Rico, and right on to Cuba or Hispaniola, until it finally went out to the Atlantic coast, over the Virginia, all the way up the coast, and off into the upper Atlantic. It was considered the worst of the worst. Now, the majority of hurricane reporting didn't really come until 1850, the 1850s, the full meteorological society coming together and making accurate reports. But they still have reports from that area. And the hurricane of 1780, it was the greatest resolution because it had only been 300 years since the official importation of Westerners of Europeans to Turtle Island. Now, the Greater Invasion began 11,000 years ago when societies were no longer allowed to communicate between continents, where great disasters had been created to separate the world trade that had been going on, and the global or European narrative didn't allow the locals or the people to know that other places existed. And when finally that was allowed into the belief process, ancient memories of connection began, and our advanced race amnesia began to be challenged. That's roughly where the greater Dreamtime invasion, or the attempt to bring the mass haunting of what Europe had come to as a system to another place, an invasion of esoterica and belief takeover. The hurricane of 1780 leveled the Antilles, Haiti, and Cuba, the center of much of the great dark energies that came from the raping and robbing of the Americas. The Spanish, the French, the New Orleans, the hurricanes of New Orleans, so on and so forth, all because they were importing their class of people that were hierarchical domination and control, there to take that world for themselves.
Yeah, with the I didn't actually add this in the notes that I gave to Andrew, but I actually discussed it with him prior to this. That region now, there's a lot of money and a lot of tax havens in all those islands and things like that. In that era,
Right.
the 1780s, there was a lot of the pirate sort of concepts going on, which were controlled opposition that the Vatican created, that you sort of offered in another recording, Andrew.
I know you had, I want to switch gears a little bit because I knew you had some things you wanted to tell me personally, because when we were talking about, Puerto Rico, I've talked a lot about that on the show here, because I went there back in August and September, and the Bermuda Triangle and all the stuff of the Bermuda Triangle coming online. You had something specifically to tell me about Ponce de Leon, and you were going to tell me on air.
Oh, yeah. Good old Ponce de Leon. There are times that people, as an individual with a name, gets the benefit, of being identified by fake history as a good guy, when in fact he led a group of people that were doing very bad things, and yet the physical person never knew it because he was in a belief system where he was following the light. And he got held for the contracts of all the people that got killed from the white invasion. He literally is the spiritual contract holder of everyone being killed from smallpox, everyone being killed from the various conquistadors that came through and were false gods. That was his karmic bad luck life. But as a soul, he knew it, that he would become that lightning rod. And
What about
You have to
Christopher
realize how these
Columbus, his
realities.
buddy? How does he fit into it?
Same thing. He led the Dreamtime invasion. See, Ponce de Leon, Turtle Island was a massive Dreamtime fortress, and it had been many millions of years since the domination and control system could actually normally function in the local realities there. You got to realize before 800 AD, there were thousands of local realities spread throughout the world that had their own bubbles around them that protected them. And the only way you could travel from one bubble reality to the other was have DNA or soul family relations to those people in there. And since there were many destructions throughout our world, many people had different DNAs, and it was very difficult to get cross DNA unless they met in the dream world and had some type of dream DNA exchange. Well, that meant each local reality, tens of thousands, had to be invaded at the Dreamtime level first before a physical person could actually set foot on the shores of a distant land and then begin literally incarnating there. Ponce de Leon is one of those beachhead people that brings the Dreamtime invaders to Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico is the network hub for all Dreamtime attacks the people at Mexico and Turtle Island and below suffered from. That was literally the dark portal of dreams.
Okay, and I was dismantling a program around Halloween to do with Captain Hook and Never Never Land and how this actually ties into Puerto Rico. I actually got that story was written about Puerto Rico and also the pirates invading and the wench, the women, and how the sacred feminine was raped with this hook, this Captain Hook into the womb chakra. Maybe you can speak about that.
The womb chakra in St. Thomas, St. Croix area. That womb chakra had gone active about 1620 to about 1830. There were moments where it would become active, and the sea life in there would just become massive and giant. There would be fish that were never seen before, or these giant schools of fish would appear out of nowhere. And it was a local legend that the different conquistadors began to go and check out, and that's where they discovered that there was a natural portal there, and they brought their versions of their magic and sacred geometry and began to harness it. Well, as they began to harness it, they realized that there needed to be contract holders for the changes. And this is what created Hook in the first place. They needed to create a myth that would draw dreamers from the German area, or they needed to create Blackbeard to draw dreamers from the Spain area, or needed to create Jason and the Argonauts to do one for the Greek dream world, so on and so forth. And then they needed a way to cross that over into the culture of the people who also had visitors to create fake dream links so that the dream invasion of a separate reality could begin, so that a real person who actually went there and put a flag in the ground to complete a spiritual invasion.
Right, and the pirate that was actually the real pirate over there at El Moro was Cofresi, was the pirate. So I wonder if the Blackbeard came from that. But I got this as a big piece, and why Hollywood is playing on this, with the Pirates of the Caribbean and Johnny Depp. I mean, I just get there. It's something about this whole pirate thing and glorifying the pirate and the women prostitutes and this and that. It kind of brings that timeline back. This Hollywood.
Well, actually, piracy was supported by the papacy. Okay?
Yes.
Piracy was the way that you could literally change the world and allow more religions to come in, and religions that brought warriors. It was basically a big way to shake people down. The old mafia, the mafia comes up and down the street and you play protection. Protection from whom? The mafia. And if somebody else comes and tries to take protection money from you, they might come and help you. Might. Okay? That's what the piracy issue is about. It was a funding of a true rebel organization because the church learned a long time ago if it did not allow rebel people to live on the world would change faster than they could change. So they created an organization that was highly corruptible, and then paid them to go and do what they loved, which was bad things. And all they had to do was not tell anyone for many generations in a row.
Okay,
And that's
back
how many
in...
of these family seals and sacred crests were used, because they'd be sinking ships that were carrying energy exchange for value from one country to another, which was invested in a sacred geometry system of domination and control.
There was a lot of the pirate sort of concepts going on, which were controlled opposition that the Vatican created, that you sort of offered in another recording, Andrew.
Yes. You had the pirates who were authorized by their kings to be pirates. Many British ships became pirates. Many French ships became their own pirates against British ships. And that's where a lot of the laws of the ocean, the maritime laws, came into effect, because property and the energy of property. Oftentimes when they were taking gold, or Spanish gold galleon ships that were coming from the Incan areas, that gold had energy on it that needed to be transmuted into a greater alchemical process of controlling of the world. So there wasn't the value in the gold itself, it was the energy behind the gold. And when you would have pirate ships take the gold, they were taking an energy that was meant for another esoteric magic and practice system. So it was greatly, it wasn't just the value of the gold, it was the energy and the alchemy behind that stuff.
Yes, yeah, you've some recordings I don't think I made a video of yet, but you talk about the residual energy in objects, like artifacts and stuff like that. So it's more about, for me, the way that gold was acquired at great suffering and carnage, and the conquistadors with their gold fever and stuff like that. And it's interesting now that you say that, like I think the first Pirates of the Caribbean, where the gold coins were cursed, and people that took the money were cursed and stuff like that. It drew out the haunted pirates and stuff like that. So it's fascinating. But I see
Yes.
I see we're talking with a theme on weather here. So I suggested something that brought up for me was, say, these Spanish galleon ships that were hit by massive storms. And what we've said is that these storms are resolution for the Earth. So, do you have something to offer with that, mate? Were they targets for the weather?
Yes, they were. So the Hong Kong typhoon in 1874, where more than 2,000 people died, and then also off of Macau, and that was just a colony at that time. But that is where the East India Trading Company was doing their worst drug trades, the setting up and the taking over of many things through the opium and the poppy, so on and so forth, and then the bringing of the cocaine and all that other stuff that they were doing, heroin. Okay?
Yeah.
So yes, these places where pirates or money assemble is where the exchange between what is commonly 3D matrix value to things that have great esoteric value to those practitioners. They become bazaars and black markets. So the Spanish controlled most of the South Americas, the British most of the Americas and the North. Now, the Dutch, the Germans, they all traded too. They all had vessels that could go there, but it was the British Navy versus the French Navy, and the French versus the Spanish, and then the Spanish and the French versus the British. So it was a continuous triumvirate of battling of each other. The Great Mediterranean, it had already, the Italian fleets just weren't quality at that particular era of time. Yes. They had divested their power into the other powers. So these bazaars of darkness occurred, and Cuba was one of those examples. Haiti is one of those examples. All of the major islands there that now have banks, like, why do you think people put their money into the Cayman Islands banks? These offshore banks, because the storms create potency to store those energies there. So it's a digital way now, but in the old days there were these vaults that would hold these huge, humongous stores of gold and silver and captured things. And in fact, it wasn't about the value of the gold. It was the esoteric practitioners who would come to these islands in the vaults and do the magic on the gold, and then it would be brought to their home countries and smelted into the cursed Babylonian money.
Mm, mm. Yeah, obviously the people that had access to this stuff were all the contract holders that you've said were the middle management cut out between World War One, the Spanish flu, and World War Two. There were the lineages related to that, obviously, mate.
Correct.
Mm.
So the Hong Kong process was a resolution of the karma that was created from the great drug trade that was going on there at that time.
Yes.
So each and every one of the storms represents a resolution of something that was going on in the area.
Mm.
We know that the Mongol army was defeated by a technological process. I know this because that's what I go back in the perspective. There was that era. Japan was a protected place. Off-worlders were still allowed into the physical reality there.
Mm.
Japan didn't really come out of its isolation until the 1870s.
Yeah. I mean, for me, mate, and this is a tangent. We're trying not to go into tangents, but I want to actually explore Japan in thoroughness with you over another chat sometime, because it's a fascinating place, that's for sure. So
Right.
I feel that there was probably a lot of priests in Japan that were summoning this, were there at that time?
Yep. Yep.
Because one thing, and it's probably not this short recording that we're going to do, but what I did in sort of my own research after I had a chat with Andrew, and these conversations are a product of that research, is that throughout history and ages and regions of the world, there's a common theme of gods associated with the weather, or deities, or this being such as kamikaze, which is obviously manifested intent of the people and the earth in alignment for balance and resolution. So yeah, it's fascinating, mate. The relationship between beings, and say what I mentioned about the contract holders in indigenous tribes and areas of the world. I know through the Native Americans there's weather shaman and stuff like that, through what you've offered in many of the classic callers and stuff like that. So what we're trying to do is formulate associations with patterns that have gone on for a long time, that this technological era sort of maintain the ignorance of our history, if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The ignorance of our history. So the most important thing to understand here is these storms of the past were creating karma also, as well as resolution of karma. The modern storms today are not creating new karma, they're only resolving karma, because of the technological advancement of many different cultures and societies to learn esoteric weather control, technological weather control, and then global weather control. Though most of them understood local weather control, then they understood global weather warfare. And you have a surface and a subsurface communities having global weather warfare between their proxy governments.
Yeah, and managing the local realities and things like that, and
Right.
employing, say, DNA technology in relation to the weather. It's just technology, mate. That's all that you've sort of taught me.
Right.
So,
And storms can be used in a very positive way to charge people with energy. Yeah? And it's long, people have long felt the storms coming. And once again, we want to offer, as part of this episode, a mission, a concept for you to do. There are storms that are all over the world. Pick one up, find one, connect to it, and know this is the age of resolution. Wherever there is a hurricane or a storm, you can bring your consciousness to it. You can bring all of the variety of contract revocations that are available on the website. The Union and Communion Consciousness Strike. The key here is to be a sacred, neutral witness and presenter to the very storms that are there, and to ask for your personal resolution to remove yourself from the forced evolutionary system, and to put your thoughts to the collective consciousness coming together, creating these storms that are seen and unseen world storms, time-based storms, rift time-based storms, as well as the physical matrix resolution that they are. Invest your effort. Invest above the mediocrity levels and allow yourself to do your first mission in the service to Earth. Andre, thank you much. This has been a great little cover episode as we've talked about some of the history. And when we come back, we're going to be having another episode of Adventures into Reality, the Weather Edition.